Hello everyone, this is Lord Kernian, and I am back with the long overdue Game 6 of the Nova Open Tournament that took place in Arlington, Virginia in 2014. Sorry this is so long overdue. I had set to do this report. I had it all prepared. I had the keynote ready. And then my computer that morning decided I was going to have a rather unfortunate encounter with a large cup of coffee. So it fried my computer completely. I lost the keynote that I had prepared, and I thought I lost all the pictures because I had already downloaded them to my computer and deleted them off my phone to open up space. So I thought I had lost them all. Then about a week ago, I was studying for exams, and I see in my Dropbox there's a folder called Camera Uploads. It's like, huh, what's this? So I opened it up, and turns out I had set it so that my computer automatically backs up all my photos on my Dropbox account. So I had a folder there with all my photos from my camera phone, which worked out really well. So I looked in there, and turns out I had all the pictures from this game, so I was able to get that out. Fortunately, my notes for the game were not electronic and were handwritten, so I have all the notes for that still. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a pretty good picture of what happened in this game. I've tried twice to record this video now, and Keynote keeps having problems, so hopefully it's actually hearing my voice this time, and it hasn't already cut off after 50 seconds or so. Anyway, onto the report. This game sees me drawn up against Lizardmen. So here's my list if you haven't seen it before. And here's my opponent's list. He had a Slam level 4 Death, who was also the BSB. He had the Channeling Staff, the Reservoir of Eldritch Energy, Harmonic Convergence, Higher Shade of Consciousness, and yeah, that was it. He also had an Old Blood with the Armor of Destiny, Great Weapon, and the Crown of Command. He had a Priest level 1 Heavens with a Scroll and a Ruby Ring of Ruin. Then he had 4 mounted Scarvets, exactly what you expect with Scarvets. They were all outfitted slightly differently, but the gist of it was they all had 1-up armor save. One of them had 1-up rerollable, the other 3 had ward saves. I think one of them had 4-up ward, the other one had 5-up ward, and the third one had 4-up ward versus the first wound. Then they all had great weapons, except for one had a magical weapon, Sword of Might, to give magical attacks in case he faces ethereals. So there was that. I knew those guys would maybe be an absolute pain to deal with. Then he had 41 Saurus, 3 units of 10 Skink Skirmishers, unit of 4 Pterodons, unit of 3 Pterodons, a Bastillodon, and 2 units of 2 Salamanders. So I look at this list and kind of the gist of what I'm thinking. This is a typical avoidance Lizardman army with one big block that I'm kind of anticipating him shoving up my throat. He's got a Death Slam trying to Death Snipe me, and then his block of Saurus is basically just immobile. Meanwhile, everything's dancing around me, killing my chaff, getting min points, and just possibly sneaking out a small win. Otherwise, if I avoid the Saurus block, basically he's probably going to sneak out a small win. So I think the best way to deal with this, from what I've seen, is for his skirmishers and for all of his chaff of which there is a ton. In order for it to be effective, it needs to be operating out away from his general. Well, even though they're cold-blooded, Skinks are leadership 5. So I should be able to get some, failed rally tests. So basically my goal is to cause some panic tests with both my bolt throwers, my archers, and my magic missiles. Deal a couple wounds to these units, make them take panic tests. Leadership 5, outside of BSB and General, which is in this game one and the same, outside of that, there's a pretty good chance of them failing. And then there's a pretty good chance of them either running off the board, because most of these units are going to be operating near the flanks, or if they don't run off the board, they might then fail to rally. So my goal is to make him take panic tests, make him flee charges. He might not rally after he flees and run off the board. My magic missiles should be able to clear some of his units completely, especially if I double up or triple up on some of these magic missiles. Clear chaff that way. The Scarvets I can probably deal with magic. I have the metal signature, which is pretty good. I have Death Snipes, which they don't have a great ward save, so I should be able to deal with that. Basically, I want to clear off everything and try to maybe deal with the Saurus if the opportunity presents itself. It probably won't, so I'm probably just going to ignore the Saurus, but I should be able to get the Bastillodon, and if he makes a big mistake, I can possibly get the General. So that's the plan. We're going to see how it played out. So going with deployment, going left to right, he had his pterodons, unit of salamanders behind them. He had a unit of 10 skink skirmishers there, and behind them he had 2 of his 4 scarvets on cold ones. Over here he had a big gap left center, or across from my left center, kind of going with a refused flank over here to the right. So on the right side, on his refused flank, he had a Bastillodon, his big unit of Saurus with the Old Blood installed in there. His slan was next to them. Skinks were next to them with the level 1 heavens there. Then he had his 2 other scarvets there. His unit of salamanders next to them, and then on the far flank he had a unit of skinks. What you can't see in this picture is a unit of 4 pterodons who initially were behind that wall. They had already moved by the time I took this picture. He had already started his turn, so they had just started moving. So they're there though. They were on this flank. They were deployed in front of the slan and the skinks in the woods, and then he vanguarded up behind the wall for shooting protection. Yep, there's his slan, and there's 2 of his scarvets next to the salamanders, and you can see his level 1 there in the unit of skinks. So going on my side, across from my left flank, or on my left flank, I have my 2 bolt throwers, and I have a unit of reavers. Closer to middle, I have my unit of silver helms with both my general and my BSB. So I wanted my general and my BSB together in this game, because my BSB has the MR2 item, and both my general and my BSB have dragon armor, giving him a 6-up ward. So against his general's death magic, I have a 4-up ward save, which is pretty solid. Behind my helm bus, I have Eagle. Next to them, I have my Swordmasters. And then next to them, I have my White Lions with the Band of the World Dragon, which has both of my mages in there for both miscast protection and death protection. Then over here on my far right flank, I have my 2 units of archers. I have 2 more bolt throwers on the hill, and then I have my reavers vanguarding up. So despite his plentiful number of drops, he got first turn. And he started off with something that I'd completely forgotten about. Turns out pterodons have rocks that they can drop. I'd completely forgotten about this. It has been a couple years since I played Lizardmen. So I made a big mistake here by vanguarding these guys up so they could just fly over. So that's what they did. They flew over, they dropped rocks, and they dropped the unit, which sucks. Over here, same thing. He flew over, reformed, and then landed there in front of the wall and killed them. The salamanders that were on this side of the board then moved up behind the wall to preserve points. They were far away from my infantry, and he didn't want to open them up to bolt throwers. So he just put them behind the wall to protect them all game. Basically, you know, he's not going to use them, but they're not going to die either. So he put them there to protect them from points, which is fair. Over here on the right, he advanced like that. And then, yeah, his main block just kind of wheeled to face towards my main infantry where they'll be coming from. And the Bastillodon moved up to get in range of his magic missile. Yep, there shows his right flank. And here is on across from my left. So he moved both of his scarvets down from the hill, and he moved the skinks next to them. They're both the skinks are about even with the building that we saw. Magic phase was pretty uneventful. He didn't really have much that he could cast. The only thing he was in range for death was he could have cast Death's, I think, Caress of Lenneth, I think it was. The number 2 death spell, excuse me. Number 2 death spell on either of my mages. They're Battle World Dragons, so probably not that good use of dice. So I stopped Chain Lightning. Wasn't able to stop the Bastillodon spell. I let it through. Fortunately, he rolled pretty low for the random effect, only did d6 strength 4 hits, killed 3 Swordmasters. High Elf turn 1. I started off with a charge from my Silver Helms into the Pterodons. So I did this for a couple reasons. I figured he was more than likely going to flee. Well, right behind the building is his Razordons, or his Salamanders. So they're testing on the leadership skink. I thought with them fleeing through the Salamanders, pretty good chance of him causing a panic test and having his Razordons run. And then, you know, both those units are trying to rally on a 5. Odds are he'll fail one of them, and that unit will go off the board. So that's why I did that, and he did indeed flee. And sure enough, the Salamanders failed their panic test and ran. So if either of these units now fail their rally test, they're going to probably go right off the board, which is nice. over here on my right flank, my one archer's wheeled to face towards the pterodons. The other one moved up and wheeled to face towards the also the pterodons and the skinks. And then magic phase, I got off, not Shems, I got off the metal signature on one of his cold ones. He either let it go or failed to dispel, I forget which one, but either way, spell goes off. I rolled d6 hits, I only rolled a 1, and then rolling to wound, I rolled a 1, so I didn't get the wound on him. One of my units of archers then shot at this back unit of skinks and was able to kill 3, but he passed his panic test. The other unit of archers and the 2 bolt throwers unloaded on these pterodons and completely wiped them off the board, which was nice. And then my 1 bolt thrower on this side opened up at his pterodons and killed one of them. So we go to Lizardmen turn 2. He started off with both of his Scarvets charging my bolt throwers on the hill, and they both made it pretty easily. It wasn't a really long charge. I think he needed like 7s or 8s, and he made both. And then both of these guys rally checks, and he passed both of them, so that sucks. Leadership 5, odds are he'd fail one of them, but he ended up making both, which is good for him. These guys backed up onto the hill, in case my Silver Helms get a little aggressive. He'll have charge downhill, and then whatever wounds he can do, so it's a pretty good plan on his part. And then these skinks advanced around the building to line up shots towards my bolt throwers. He actually forgot to do this, so he had finished all of his movement, we got through magic, and we got to shooting when he realized that his pterodons are fast cav. As such, when they flee from a charge, they can then move for feigned flight roll. So he asked if he could do it. I said, sure, go ahead. Feel free to move your pterodons. Like, it's honest mistake. Like, I don't care. So he was appreciative of that. He moved them up towards that bolt thrower, fired 2 shots, rolled boxcars. Both of them are poisoned, so the bolt thrower's dead. He's like, darn it, that's what I get for being nice. After he rolled it, he offered to take it back. He's like, look, I made a mistake. I forgot a roll. It's a shame that you got punished for being, nice. And I was like, no, don't worry about it. We're on the middle to low tables on game 6 of a long weekend. Let's just have some fun. So I let him keep it, and he killed that bolt thrower. Over here, my archers were in basically a shooting gallery, and when the dust settled from all of his poison shots and his 2 salamanders, I had 4 units of archers in each unit left. And then both of these old bloods then obviously packed up the bolt throwers and reformed to face towards my main line. So, my turn. I charged the eagle at that first, or the archers at that first unit of skinks. He stood and shot and killed 1. And I really wasn't convinced that 3 archers could take what is now 7 skinks. So I also charged my eagle into them, and he decided to flee. And he got away. He went right to the edge of the board. He rolled pretty high. If he fails to rally, basically he's off the board. But obviously I failed to catch him. My other archers moved up, just kind of wheeled to face towards his skinks defending the wall. My other eagle flew up there to harass the salamanders. I mean, I'm obviously not going to kill the salamanders with an eagle, but I figured by putting him there, it interferes with his movement just enough to where he won't be able to move in such a location to where his flame templates are landing on my white lions or my sword masters, so I thought that was good. You can also see the eagle there failed his charge and ended up behind the unit of 4 archers. My cavalry advanced, keeping the Scarvets in their front arc in case he decides to charge. And then my main line just kind of wheeled and advanced towards his line again. So I'm about mid-board now. His Bastillodon had backed up in his turn, which I didn't show. So it's a bit of a long charge from this point still, but makeable at this point. Magic phase, I was able to get off 2 magic missiles at his unit of skinks behind the wall, and I killed them all to a man, and also killed the level 2 heavens in that unit. So I got points for that, which was nice. Bolt thrower that was in the woods pivoted on the spot and shot at his 2 remaining pterodons and took them off, which was also nice. And we go to Lizardmen turn 3, so this is a little confusing. I'm going to try to walk you through this as best I can. So, he started off with a charge with his one of his Scarvets that was the one that was further to the left, okay, or further to the right. I mean, right. So the closer to the edge of the board. he charged them into the archers that had charged the skinks. So I fled, figuring I'd bounce through the salamanders and I'd get away. He wouldn't be able to complete the charge. I tried to take difficult terrain tests and I failed 2 of the 3. So that unit now can't rally, which sucks. That's Old Blood then, or Scarvet tried to then redirect and he failed. The other Scarvet charged into one of the eagles who stood. The salamanders then charged into that same eagle who fled. Okay, the salamanders decided not to redirect. The Scarvet tried to redirect, and he redirected into the first eagle, or into the second eagle, I mean, who then fled. So he couldn't obviously redirect again, and so he completed as a failed charge. Okay, so then after sorting out that ridiculous series of charges, his skinks that were on the edge of the board failed to rally and ran off the board, which was nice. And yeah, there shows his 2 failed charges with his Scarvets. The Scarvets that were on the hill jumped down and hid behind the building to preserve points. I guess he felt he had distracted my cavalry for long enough, and if he got any more aggressive with them, they'd just be getting charged and killed off. So he moved them behind the building to preserve points. So if I choose to go after them, basically I'm taking my whole unit out of the game, which just suits his purposes just fine. And if I ignore them, then he's just conserving all those points. These skinks advanced towards that bolt thrower and ended up killing it off with their poison shots. So this is the last shot of the game. In this game, we had, so my initial opponent had decided that he was going to bug out early. I guess he had a long drive or something, so he left before the 6th game. As a result, I didn't have an opponent. So the guy that my opponent was playing is the Dark Elf opponent that I played in Game 4. And that Dark Elf opponent had already played this Lizardmen army. They got matched up again. So he was like, look, I've played both of you. You're both fantastic opponents. How about you two play each other instead? And I'll go get an early beer. So he offered that, and both my opponent, the Lizardmen player, and I were like, sure, I mean, that sounds good to me. So we decided to play the game. Kevin went and got a beer. And everyone was happy. Problem was, this was already like 45 minutes to an hour into the round. So we were significantly short on time to begin with. So at this point, they were calling, close to end of time. We had only gotten through turn 3. And so we just decided to speed up. I stopped taking pictures because really nothing else happened after this. The essence of the rest of the game was in my turn, he left me some long charges on the Bastiladon. I decided not to take it. I advanced kind of conservatively to prevent counter charges. Then in his next turn, he landed a flame template on my White Lions, killed the back rank, and at that point I realized that it is pointless for me to try to engage either the Bastiladon or the Saurus. Because if I engage either one of them, just my units are going to die. So I decided to back off. I reformed. And now I was just a case of just casting magic. I ended up getting this unit of skinks on this flank. I didn't get any of his Scarvets, and my cavalry at the end of the game advanced into his deployment zone to get the +1 tournament objective. So the final result was an 11-9. It was a difference of about 100 or so victory points. I forget the exact. But basically, I had killed all of his skinks. I had killed his level 1. I had killed both of his pterodon units. Didn't touch either unit of salamanders. He had killed my archers on my bolt throwers. And my archers, my bolt throwers, and my reavers. So he was up a couple hundred points. Wasn't enough to boost to the next level, so the final result was 11-9. I got +1 for getting into his deployment zone. He got +1 for getting into mine. And so the final result was a 12-10. So it was a pretty fun game. I think there was a lot of mistakes that I made, a lot of stuff that I could have done better. So what exactly could I have done differently? So I think the mistake I made was spreading myself out. I basically played right into his hand as an avoidance Lizardman army. The thing I have to realize is all of his shooting is short range. So what would have been the smarter move would have been to basically cramp into this corner, put my bolt throwers on the hill, and protect them with my infantry. Between the archers and the magic missiles, I have range superiority. He has a lot of shots, sure, but he needs to be within 8 inches of that. So in order for him to be in range to shoot me, he needs to expose himself to a lot of charges. So if I pack my units close to where they're all supporting each other, there's no way he can deal enough wounds to every unit that all of them are combat ineffective. Then I could use, a series of charges to charge into his units. If he flees, he can run off the board. If he stands, I'm obviously going to kill that unit and I can reform to face something else. So I think that would have been better. It would have made it a lot harder for him to get basically a bunch of units that basically it would have made it difficult for him to prevent all my charge angles. I also could have jumped my general out and put him on the edge of the White Lion unit, so he can use the protection from the Band of the World Dragon against a death magic, and use his increased range as a longer charge range. I could have put my BSB really in any unit for the same purposes to charge out, and then my Silver Helm suddenly become another charge threat, where they're another long-range charge threat to where if he gets too close, he's taking a risk if he decides to flee. There's a good chance that I'd catch him and then be able to reform to face something else. Meanwhile, all my bolt throwers are picking off his units, my archers will be able to pick off some stuff, and I can use my magic missiles to pick off the other chaff, and I could have taken a small win that way. Basically forced him to engage with his Saurus block if he wants to win a game, and if he engaged with the Saurus block, I can redirect them, and if a charge opportunity opens up to get my main combat units into them, I could have taken it. I think that would have been a better way to do it. I hate castling, which is why I didn't do it, but I think that would have been the smarter play in this game. Just, use the advantages I have. So, overview of the tournament as a whole. I finished bottom third. Low paint score hurt me a lot. Basically, I've had a lot of comments on Universal Battle that my army looks great, and some stuff does look good. The problem is it doesn't match. This was painted over a series of years. I've changed the method that I use to paint some of my units. I've changed the way I paint armor. I've changed the way I've done basing. So the result is kind of an army that's all over the place. The basing is different on some units. The armor color is different. Yeah, sure, everything is red, but the basing just really makes it stand out. It doesn't look like a coherent force. So because of that, they gave me the lowest possible score. Basically, it just means there were 3 colors on every model, and that's all it means. So that dropped me down a little bit. Battle points, I was a couple places higher. So just teaches me a lesson that for next tournament, I need to make sure my basing and my paint scheme is consistent from the top to the bottom of the army. So in the tournament, there were 6 games. I had 6 losses. All of them were close. I think out of all the games, if you use normal 0 to 20 scoring, where 150 points is 150 victory points is a win, then I think all but 2 would have been a draw, just a straight draw. The game against Chaos Dwarfs would not have been, and the game against Ogres would not have been, and all the rest of the games would have been just straight draws, and it would have been left to bonus points. That isn't how this tournament was played. It was played a difference of 1 victory point is a loss. So I was at the lower end of a lot of those games. What would have been a draw in most tournaments ended up being a loss, which sucks. I was able to get a good amount of objective points, like getting into deployment zone and killing expensive units, so that was at least nice. But yeah, it's just kind of a little frustrating to be that close to so many games, especially with so many games that I could have won had I played differently, even with the 1 victory point difference. 50% lowers, 50% casualties hurt. My God. I've seen stuff where it's 25%. If you're down to 25% left of the unit, it's 50%, but this one is just straight up. If you have 50%, you kill half the unit, you get half points. That was a really, really aggressive really aggressive way to award points. It basically meant I couldn't really lose many of my models at all in these units, or else I was giving up victory points, which is just hard, especially for some of my units that weren't very well protected, like my Swordmasters, for example. They gave up points in, I think, every single game except for 1, and that was the game against the Dark Elves in Game 4. Every other game, they were giving up points. And that was just a little bit... That was obviously not ideal. That hurt me a lot. List as a whole, the list was good, except for the Swordmasters. I had taken the Swordmasters with the idea that I'd be facing a lot of Warriors of Chaos. Last year at Nova, there were a ton of Warriors players. I figured it'd be a lot of the same. It was not a lot of the same. As my matchups suggested, I didn't play a single Warriors of Chaos. There were some Warriors of Chaos there. There were some Demons. Both of those I thought would have been very good matchups for me, for my army. Limited shooting, limited magic, relatively low magic missiles. That I would have been fine with. With all this ballistic skill shooting, and in this elf meta where everyone's prepared for an avoidance wood elf army or an avoidance dark elf army, there were a whole lot of magic missiles and a whole lot of small arms fire to clear chaff. That just ended up destroying my sword masters. They were bleeding points in, like I said, almost every game except for one. So I thought those guys were more trouble than they were worth. They never really did anything that spectacular in any of the games. Part of that was because I was being conservative with them because I was worried about them getting shot off the board. So yeah, if I could change anything, I wouldn't have taken sword masters. If I was intent on taking sword masters, I think small units of swords would have been better. It would have been less of a tempting arrow target. Sure, they would have been able to be cleared by arrows, but when someone's throwing 20 repeater bolt thrower shots to kill a unit of 10 swords, that's not exactly a terrible trade. It's much more devastating when he's shooting at 20 sword masters with 20 repeater bolt throwers, because you can basically take out the entire unit in one shooting phase. So I would have, if I was intent on taking swords, I would have taken them smaller units. I think that would have been better. They would have doubled as a spiky speed bump if I needed them to be chaff. I could have put them in 2 or 3 wide to charge in and assassinate characters. All those things would have been much more effective use of it, and a much better way to use the points rather than a big block of 20 with the AP banner. As good as that unit is against high armor, which is what I thought I'd be facing, it's just too much of a tempting target with all the ballistic skill and magic missile shooting that's around. Obviously, a much better choice would have been a Frostheart with unlimited time. I would have painted up the Frostheart that I have and used that in the game. I don't have unlimited time, so I didn't want to rush this Frostheart, didn't want to just throw him out there, so I ended up not taking him. Probably would have been a better choice, but what can you do? Note to self, this is just for my personal experience, and for anyone else thinking about attending a tournament, play more games. I was hurt a lot in a lot of my games from lack of experience, both not really knowing what my units could do, and then also translated to me playing a lot slower. There were a lot of situations where I was toiling over decisions, trying to work out the math in my head. And like, yeah, I can do a lot of the math in my head, but it takes me a while. So that slowed down the game. In some of the games, it hurt me on my tournament score. I think it hurt me in a game against game 4 and 5. But it also hurt my opponents. I think in game 2 and in this game against the Lizardmen, it hurt my opponent more than it hurt me. So I apologize to both of my opponents for that. I cheated them out of a bigger win, and I apologize. So in the future, I need to make sure that I play more games so that I'm capable of getting through a full 6 games without worrying about being pressed for time. So that's this report. Hopefully this all recorded, and I'll be able to post this up. Any comments or questions, post them in the comments below. And thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time.